My name's Rob. I organize Idea to IPO. We've been doing events in Silicon Valley for a number of years. We hold events multiple times a week from San Jose to San Francisco. I'd like to highlight two events that are coming up. We have a busy calendar, but here are just two that are coming up. So this Thursday, February 16th, in San Francisco, at K&L Gates, we have Stan Lewandowski talking about how to split founders' equity. So that'll be a great program. It's all the way up in San Francisco, but hope you guys can make it. Thursday the 23rd, we have a venture capital panel at Pillsbury Law Firm. They'll be discussing Silicon Valley's startup funding trends for 2017. So check out all the events on our calendar, idea.ipo.com, and all the details are there. We were launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members, no events in our calendar. At this stage, we have over 50,000 members with all our meetup groups in the Bay Area. We've completed over 1,695 events, which would make us the most active, most prolific startup event organization in Silicon Valley. Thank you.
Yay, applause.
So our mission is to promote entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, build community, and provide value in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. So to that end, we provide content that is practical, actionable, and relevant, stuff that you can actually use to succeed as entrepreneurs. We believe in community because Silicon Valley is an aspirational ecosystem. It attracts people from all over the world who come here to do great things. Who here is not originally from Silicon Valley? Who here was born and raised in Silicon Valley, besides these two guys? Okay. Anyway, whether you're a native or you arrived last night, it's important for us to provide multiple channels for you to meet people, build relationships, grow your network. In fact, we have a regular Friday event, TGIF, thank God it's Friday, over at the Hyatt Regency Santa Clara, and it's hosted by CJ Terrell, one of our team members. I'd like to have CJ come up and say a few words about that event.
Hi everyone, I'm CJ. So as Rob mentioned, we have what we call TGIF mixers. So what they are really neat ways to get to know people who are traveling in from the area, from almost any country you could imagine, from Europe, South America, Asia. I've seen it all through this group. And people come out to have just a really good time. There's no agenda, but it's to talk about what you're working on, talk about who you're working with, and if you have a startup that's gotten funded, how that funding trail is going for you so far, and other types of topics in a really casual environment in the Hyatt Regency in Santa Clara. Our next one is going to be this Friday from 8 to 11 p.m. and they are free. So if you'd like to come out and have a little fun, recommend you do so and look forward to seeing you there. Thanks.
You can tell that'll be a fun event because he's hosting it. Anyway, with regard to value, it's important we provide value at each and every one of our events, not just value for your money, which is important because we know many entrepreneurs are struggling financially. So we make sure that our events are affordable, and if you cannot afford the cover charge, let me know. We're always looking for volunteers to help us manage our events, and you can come for free. And we want to make sure that we provide a decent meal at each and every one of our events. Was this meal decent? It's not exactly a 5-star Michelin, but we're trying. More importantly, though, we want to provide value for your time, which is your most valuable resource. Anyone here getting any younger? I didn't think so. So when we hold events and you invest your time to come here, we want to make sure that you maximize your ROI. We have lots of partners that help us do what we do: law firms, venture capital firms, angel investor groups, incubators, accelerators, colleges, universities. Lots of players in Silicon Valley. Tonight, we're grateful to Datati Digital Marketing for hosting us at this beautiful venue. Is this a beautiful venue?
Yes.
I know I say this every time I'm here, but they have really nice bathrooms. Anyway, I want to have Roberta from Datati Digital Marketing come up and say a few words. Let's hear it for Roberta.
I'm glad you like our bathrooms. My name's Roberta. I'm the president here at Datati Digital Marketing. Philip and I co-own the company. We've been in Silicon Valley for about, well, I don't want to give you the exact date because it'll make me sound really old, but over 20 years. And we've been working a lot with high-tech companies. Recently, I've shifted my focus a little bit, and I've started to work with a lot of startups and small businesses because they're the ones that need the marketing help in Silicon Valley. So I've developed a program. We call it the Big Program for Small Business. If any of you are interested in that, there is a banner in the back that talks about it a little bit, but I also have additional information on that. It's kind of a kickstart marketing. It's like getting you going and then helping you find a path for growth for small businesses, especially that are already ongoing businesses. We also happy to host idea to IPO events for Rob. I guess we do that, every month or so. So we're happy to support him in that and meet all you great startups and entrepreneurs because it's always good to make connections with everybody. So if you have any questions about what we do at Ducati, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm sure Philip will be happy to talk to you. Just find us afterwards and enjoy the event.
So though our local mission in Silicon Valley is to support entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, our greater mission is to democratize entrepreneurship all around the world. To that end, we have a robust YouTube channel, youtube.com/idea-to-IPO. We have tons of videos. We've documented many of our events. And this rich, valuable content is available on demand, anytime, anywhere, totally free of charge. Whether you're in Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Maui, Moscow, or Timbuktu. Who's been to Maui? Just you two? Who's been to Moscow? Cool. Who's been to Timbuktu? Anyway, most of these places have Wi-Fi. In fact, Timbuktu does have Wi-Fi. I checked on Wikipedia. So anywhere you have access to Wi-Fi, you have access to great content that we produce here in Silicon Valley, and we want to level the playing field so that great entrepreneurs can come from anywhere in the world, not just here in Silicon Valley. Our partner in this endeavor is one of the top professional videographers in all of Silicon Valley. Let's hear it for Tim Jeggers.
Thank you, Rob. So I'm Tim. I am the partner doing the video that you'll find on the YouTube channel, which I manage for Rob. I upload most of the content and create a lot of it myself. Along with that, I do other kinds of video production, multimedia content, some photography here and there. I film weddings. So if you have any questions or anything relative to that stuff, I could talk to you about that later if you'd like. And other than that, I'd like to thank you for coming. And one request I do have is when we have questions towards the end of the talk, please hold them for the end of the talk for starters. We're going to set a microphone up, and then you can go line up orderly and ask your questions at the end. And that way we can guarantee we have good audio that feeds into the cameras so that when people watch the video, they'll know what the answers are in correlation to. So yeah, thank you again for coming and your cooperation ahead of time. And yeah, here's Rob.
Okay, I want to take a couple minutes here. We have a platform, and we want to allow our attendees to connect. So maybe you have an announcement about something. Maybe you are looking for a CTO. Maybe you're looking for a co-founder. Maybe you have a position and you have an opening in your organization and you want to fill it. Maybe you are looking for a position in an organization. Maybe tomorrow's Valentine's Day, you want to say something. But anyway, so let's take a couple minutes. So I'll come by with Mike. Does anyone have an announcement that they want to make and leverage this platform?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Gladys Folio, and I'm a recent graduate of San Francisco State University, and I majored in international business. I have experience in sales and marketing, but I'm really looking to get into business development. So anybody who's within that role has experience. If you want to talk to me about that, I would be more than happy. Or if you know someone who's recruiting for that, I would be really happy to talk to you about that too. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Navid, and I'm new to Bay Area. I'm Iranian, also affected by that policy, and but it is over for me, at least. Right now, I'm with Green Card looking for a software developer position. If somebody needs software developer, I'm happy to work there. Thank you.
You ladies have an announcement? All right, anyone else? Oh, you already had an announcement.
I don't get to. I just wanted to let everyone know, obviously you've seen the space here. We do have extra space that we're making available for like day and week sort of drop-in work if people need workspaces. It's just getting started. It'll probably start like March 1st. We haven't sort of worked out all the details, but if somebody's looking for a workspace, like they want to just hang out during the day, have Wi-Fi, have a quiet place, come talk to me or Philip afterwards and we'll sort of get you on the list and then we'll let you know when that space is available.
Okay, without further ado, I want to introduce tonight's featured speaker. She is one of the top immigration attorneys in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, California, and the nation. Anyway, she's very knowledgeable. She's passionate about helping entrepreneurs succeed, and you're in for a treat tonight. So let's hear it for Nadia Yaqub, attorney at law.
Thanks, Rob. Can I take the mic?
Oh, no, do I use this? Okay.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I just want to start by congratulating you on your bravery. To want to start a business takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I think to want to start it or bring it to another country takes a lot of courage. So I just want to say, congratulations to you. I also want to congratulate you on your initiative to find out about immigration requirements in the United States. I will tell you that if any of this information actually won't be as confusing as some of my, not confusing, but complicated as some of my other content. But generally, immigration law is considered one of the most complex areas of law in the United States. This is coming straight from Supreme Court justices. So if you find that the laws are confusing or bewildering, you are not alone, okay? So just a little bit background about me. I have been practicing immigration law now. It's going to be 17 years. But I actually started working for immigrants and refugees, 23 years ago. So it was in 1994. I worked for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And then ever since, I've been working, whether as editor-in-chief of an immigration law journal or at Asian Law Caucus or at the European Court of Human Rights, and then the world's largest immigration law firm, the courts, et cetera. It's been a long career, but I've always been very committed to immigration. And it actually comes from a very personal place because I'm an immigrant myself, and I'm actually part of a large tribe of immigrants, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'd love to know where people, what status people hold, if you're comfortable sharing. So how many of you are here as visitors? On the visitor visa. Okay. How many of you are students, international students, F1s? Okay. And any of you H-1Bs? Great. Any of you green card holders? I know one. Okay. Any of you citizens? Okay. Great. So just to give you a little bit of a story, my dad and his older brother came over here to study on the F1. My dad's brother got his H-1B when he graduated from Berkeley and got his H-1B at McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas then sponsored him for a green card. My uncle became a green card holder, then became a citizen. Then he sponsored all 8 of his brothers and sisters, one of whom was my dad. And then 11 years later, we were able to proceed with the green card. So it can be very slow, but the process works. So literally, like all 8 of my uncles and aunts migrated over to the US with their relatives. So I believe in the system, which is why, but I completely understand its frustrations, but I do believe that it works. Now, under Trump, we're gonna find out how this all plays out. So let me tell you a little bit about what we'll be discussing tonight, okay? So we're gonna talk first and foremost about what President Trump's immigration agenda was during the election, what his campaign was. Okay, this is really, to give you a sense of where his priorities are. And then we'll talk about his recent immigration executive orders. There were 2 that he released, and we'll talk about them again to give you a sense of what his true concerns are with immigration enforcement. Okay, because they really shed light on what he's after. And then we'll talk about a draft executive order that was leaked on protecting US jobs. So he's kind of had three aspects of immigration he's tackling. The third one is obviously US jobs, and it has not been released yet. I mean, formally, it's not been released for enforcement, but we have an idea of what he's looking into by the draft, and we'll talk about that. We will talk about the International Entrepreneur Parole Program that President Obama signed into effect just as he was leaving office. This program is not supposed to take effect until July 16th, 2017. So we're going to talk about the program and with the very big caveat that we don't know if it will actually take effect. And I'll explain why. This is truly in balance, like we don't know. And there's a reason why, and it's based on the draft executive order, okay? And then we'll just open up to questions and answers, all right? All right, so Trump has this 10-point plan during the campaign to put America first. What does that mean? What I want you to know is his major concerns are protecting illegal immigration and the US border. For you, you're obviously not illegal aliens. You're not trying to come here illegally. You're not overstaying extensively. But what it means for you is that you will face screening at the airports. Okay, what that means is you might face more questioning at the airport. They might want to know, why are you coming here? What are you doing? Even if you have a visa, they might just question you some more. And it's going to mean delays, just in processing times. Okay, so if you are applying for a benefit in the United States, like you're an H-1B going to a green card, you're just going to see processing delays. But I'm just going to give you, some of the his 10-point agenda, so you can see how it's really about a different group than you. First of all, it's to build the wall on the southern border of Mexico. Unless you're an entrepreneur who's into construction, I don't think this is going to affect you. And then implement what he wants, a biometric entry-exit visa tracking system. So that means probably when you're leaving, you're going to have to do more swiping out, right? And that's what I mean. There might be slowdowns at airports and at land border crossings. He wants to suspend visa issuance at any country where adequate screening cannot occur. So what does that mean? Consulates, for example, Pakistan processes visas for Iranian nationals. There's no consulate or embassy in Iran, right? Similar to Libya or Iraq or Yemen. So these are neighboring countries that are processing the visas of these nationals. And so again, it's just going to mean slowdown. There's just going to be greater scrutiny, slower visa processing times, okay? So if you have to pick up a visa, plan ahead. What he wants to do, now this could be your situation, he wants to end a catch and release. And that is, if you are trying to cross the border illegally, whether it's Canada or Mexico, what the government used to do was just stop you and say, go home. Now they're not going to do that. They're going to take you in and formally put you into deportation proceedings and get a big outstanding removal order in your record. That just was administratively burdensome for the government. So they used to just say to people, okay, come on, go back, if they stopped you. But now they're not going to do that. And just so you know, there's a lot of illegal crossing out of Canada at the Canadian border, too, because people will fly from, I'm just saying hypothetically, let's say Lusaka to Toronto, Nigeria to Toronto, and then they'll try to come down. A lot of Indian nationals do that, too. So that's ending, what does that mean? Ending catch and release, okay? So just really coming down hard on people trying to cross the border illegally. Living in the Bay Area, you might be hearing about this, ending sanctuary cities. So San Francisco is a sanctuary city. What does that mean? It means we don't really enforce immigration law to the extent that, how does that work? It means that if you are stopped for a crime, like let's say you get in a fight at a bar, or you were driving under influence, if you're stopped, officers generally don't ask you what your status is, okay? Because they don't think, the police doesn't think that immigration should be they should be added to their responsibilities. And they'll often look the other way if they know you're illegal or not here lawfully. They're trying to end federal funding for San Francisco. So just in the last few days, it's been in the news that there are more raids coming down from ICE. More people, they're just going after people who are here illegally. Again, it's not going to affect you, but it's just to say if your visa status is expiring, I would not recommend overstaying. They're getting extremely strict, right? And a lot of people do overstay. I would recommend in this climate to not do that and to talk to an immigration counsel about what your options are. Okay? This is also not going to affect you. When we order removal of a foreign national and we try to return them, oftentimes the home country won't take them back. Let's say the person has contracted HIV in jail. There are countries that say, I don't know what to do with this person. I don't want him back. Or Vietnam oftentimes rejects a lot of its nationals. It's just all these political reasons why a country will say, I'm not taking that person back. Well, the US is saying, too bad, you have to. And then the other two ones are kind of big. End DACA, which was one of President Obama's really big accomplishments during his administration. So what is it? It is basically, it stands for Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. And this is for people who were brought in by their parents illegally. So these are young children. These were young children who didn't really have a role in being brought over, but now they're here. They're not here lawfully, and this was something President Obama created to give them work authorization, ability to get driver's licenses, ability to go to college, and he wants to end this. So it's very unfortunate, and unfortunately, even when it was in place during President Obama's administration, it was being challenged in court, and it was not, it was being challenged successfully, meaning it didn't look very strong even during his administration. But now, and I say that to say, I think it will end. And then the last is, if you are arrested for a crime, even if you're charged, even if you have not been formally convicted, now under Trump's executive order, you can be promptly removed, okay? So he's coming down really hard on criminals. I have a lot of clients with criminal convictions, right? And so long as you are here legally and you're not removable for being here illegally, then generally you should be okay. But if your legal status is, let's say, tenuous, and you're caught committing a crime, then you will be removed, okay? Like without any hearing or anything. So he wants this to be done pretty promptly. So you can get a sense that this is really about protecting from, illegal, like really controlling illegal immigration. So it doesn't really affect you, but it's, a lot of, there are entrepreneurs who are here unlawfully, but in general, this is not affecting your demographic. What he does want to do, however, in his immigration agenda is to protect U.S. workers. He's very clear. And this is a very important point for you to understand if you are trying to launch a business here, because in your business plan, you have to talk about hiring U.S. workers. I think that that's the big takeaway from what he's releasing and what he's emphasizing in his agenda. Okay, he's very clear, he wants to reform even legal migration to serve the best interests of America and its workers. So he's very, big on these things. And you'll see, I'll talk more about that in a later slide. Okay, so what's happened? He was in office 1 week and he released 2 executive orders. The first one was for protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. So it was released on Friday, January 27th in 2017. Now, what did it do? And again, this may not pertain to you, but I'll tell you what fear it caused. So why it doesn't pertain to you is because it's limited to nationals of 7 countries: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Okay? Now, the big fight has been that no terrorist act in the United States has been committed by nationals of these countries. So, like, why are we targeting them? And the reason is because ISIS has camps there, and so they export terrorism. This is the argument, okay, that they make. So that's why they're targeting these 7 countries. So what they said is you could be a green card holder, you could be a student, you could be an H-1B, you could be for any visa status. From one of these 7 countries, you're not allowed into the country for 90 days. This created so much confusion because there are a lot of Irani scientists, software engineers, in the Bay Area, for example, but certainly across the universities for professors. There are a lot of professors from these 7 countries, okay? And they were just not allowed to come in, even if they had a green card. Then what he did, which I think is even more tragic, is that he said refugees from all countries around the world are not permitted entry for 120 days. Now, as someone who has worked with refugees in Bosnia, and I worked for UNHCR in DC, I can tell you that the screening is really, really long and intense, okay? And these people have been, like, approved, okay, and they're not being allowed in they were not being allowed in for 120 days. And then again, even worse, is Syrian refugees just not allowed indefinitely. A small thing that he suspended in his executive order, but which could apply to you, is that if you're someone who comes a lot and doesn't need to actually go in for a visa interview at the US consulate, so let's say you've held a B1 for 10 years, or you've held an H1B, you need to get a new visa stamp, there are protocols at each consulate to just waive the interview process. So just mail in your passport, get the new stamp, get it back. And so Trump said, you can't do that anymore. Now the consulates are saying, too bad, we still will. So they are continuing to do this, okay? But it's caused some confusion and it's caused some delays at the consulates. The big takeaway, okay, I'll tell you, the big scare for most people was that this executive order says we're going to continue reviewing countries and we may be adding. So this is where our phones started to ring off the hook, because people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, all I don't know if you guys remember after 9/11, there were like 20 countries that the male nationals of which had to register with the United States. So there was a lot of panic. Oh my God, is this going to be happening again? Is he just going to grow this list? What countries are going to be on there? So that was, I think, the big panic. The other big panic, just the takeaway from this, is how quickly he released it on a Friday night and how quickly enforcement started, which was Saturday morning, right? Or Friday night, Saturday morning. I mean, I think that's the big takeaway, is that it's kind of, it's just so rapid. And so you have to be ready for things changing very quickly with this president, okay? Right now, I'm going to talk about what's going on with the way the government has responded. When I say the government, the way the judiciary and the public has responded to these orders, he has backed off and said he's not planning to add any more countries, okay? So for right now, it's really limited to these 7. And actually, we'll talk about what's happening with these orders right now. Okay, so as I said, there was public outrage over the executive orders, lawsuits. I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, I'm very proud of the lawyers, being a lawyer in this instance, because the lawyers acted so fast and they filed lawsuits literally Friday and Saturday, saying that this executive order is unconstitutional and should not be enforced. And the judges responded and said, yes, it's true. It's not constitutional. Why are we targeting these 7 countries? And there is now a ban on the enforcement of this order, okay? So everything's back to normal. I mean, President Trump is arguing that there is necessity for these orders, but so far he has not succeeded. There was a major hearing in San Francisco just last week, and it was at the appellate level. It's at the court I used to work at, and the judges said, no, this order, it's not necessary. So it's not being enforced right now. Of course, he could file, they're going to appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court might have a different position. So again, things are very fluid. It just means we have to pay attention to the news, okay? As I mentioned, for now, because of this public outrage, the government has said, okay, we're not adding any more countries. All right. So what's the second one? This goes to the issue of criminal aliens, okay? And enhancing public safety in the interior of the United States. So as I've talked about, he wants to end sanctuary cities. So we've already started seeing some ICE raids happening in sanctuary cities. He wants the prompt removal of foreign nationals with removal orders. So there are a lot of people who have removal orders. They're just staying here. They just ignore the removal order. Some of them are like 20 years old, 15 years old. These removal orders are. They just don't go. And, because removal often happens for really, it's if you've entered here illegally, you're caught, you go to a removal hearing, the judge says, okay, you're ordered removed because you entered without inspection. Says, all right, and you'll say, okay, I'll go on my own to Mexico, and then you just don't go. What's going to happen? It's 15 years goes by, people live their lives. So now he's saying, we're going to get tough on that. We're just going to make sure people get removed. And the primary reason why removal wouldn't happen is because it's expensive, okay? And that's, he's saying we're going to do that. Prioritize removal of criminal foreign aliens. And the big thing in the order, it's quite frightening, is he says, even if just charged and not convicted yet. His reasoning is, why waste US money, taxpayer money, on criminal proceedings for someone who's here illegally anyway, so let's get him out of here. Does that make sense? So because I can understand from a very conservative point of view, our criminal system offers people free legal counsel if they don't have money. And a lot of the people that don't have money are here who are not lawfully. So we spend all this money providing them free legal counsel. They actually also spend time in our jails that are paid by US tax dollars. And the reasoning is, just let's get them out of here. Okay? So that's what he's thinking. He wants to hire 10 additional immigration enforcement officers, and he wants to impose sanctions on countries that do not accept the return of their nationals. So again, you're kind of seeing he's just getting really tough on criminal aliens. I wouldn't say it's not your issue, because I had a senior VP at IBM who had domestic violence convictions, more than one. And so, I'm not saying that crime is exclusive to, crime and class are not mutually exclusive. I'm just saying that if you do, you have to be really careful. Don't drink and drive. Now that you're in California, marijuana is legal, so it's not a problem, but it used to be careful with possession of marijuana. And don't get in fights at bars. I would say those are the things I see the most. Okay? All right, so what's next? Draft order, protecting American jobs and workers by strengthening the integrity of foreign worker visa programs. This is probably what is of most concern to you guys. So what's the big picture? It's all very vague, by the way. I can email it to you guys if you want it. You can drop me a note. I unfortunately left my business cards on my desk as I was running out. I'm very sorry, but my contact details are on the last slide of the presentation. You can just take a picture, and my email's there. Please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to send you the draft text of this executive order, but what you will see, it's very vague, and it's just basically saying all regulations are about this thick, it's this thick, the book, but it says all regulations that allow foreign nationals to work in the US must be reviewed to see if they are in the national interest, and if not, should be changed. That's the big picture of this executive order. So the question becomes, all of these are addressed in the executive order, right? So the first is B1, B2 visitors. He wants to recommend more clearly the list of activities that are permissible for B1, B2 visitors, okay? Sorry, is it really small? But you know, for most of you, this isn't going to be an issue. These are narrow situations where there's a B1 in lieu of H1. So for the H1B high skilled worker visa, a lot of people are just, they're going to work in that capacity, but just for short periods of time, they come in B1 status. He wants to get rid of that. He wants to get rid of anything that would allow people to come in and work on the visitor visa, okay? Next thing that he's really going after, okay, I'm sorry, we're gonna take questions at the end. Is that okay? Okay. So the next is the E2 Treaty Investor Program. This is for nationals of countries with which the United States has a treaty. So not all countries have a treaty, but Iran has a treaty, by the way. But so India and China do not, for example. But the E2 Treaty Investor Program, it's allowed people to, you know, some people to spend like $50,000, $60,000, invest it over here in a business, and they come over, they bring their family, and this is not the purpose of the investor visa anymore. And part of it is because one of the requirements is you have to generate jobs, but I don't think that's been enforced as strictly, and I think we're going to be seeing that. I think they're going to come down with more concrete guidelines of how many jobs you have to create. Okay? So what about the H-1B program? The EO stands for executive order. The EO recommends making the process for allocating H-1B visas more efficient. As you guys may know, right now the allocation of H-1B visas is by an annual lottery in April. And it's to make that process more efficient and ensure that the beneficiaries are the best and brightest. I think that's lame. But anyway, I mean, what does that mean, the best and the brightest? I mean, they already are. Like every H-1B worker is like, you know, got college degree, tons of work experience. They already are, so I don't know how they're going to make them even more. But anyway, so that's the H-1B program comments. So I think what we can anticipate is maybe some revision to the lottery process. So I think that's that. What about the STEM OPT? Now, I don't know how many of you are affected by this. How many of you are F1s? Okay. F1s in a science, technology, engineering, or math field. So STEM OPT is for international students who, by the way, spend a ton of money to study in the United States, okay? And they come here and they earn their degrees and they get 1 year of work authorization. Okay, and what was happening is that 1 year, they would try for the lottery, H-1B lottery, one time, and they probably wouldn't get selected because the chances aren't that high at the lottery, and they have to go home. And it was actually hurting the US universities because they're like, people don't want to come study here because it's not possible for them to stay here long term after they finish their studies. So what the Obama administration did is, okay, for the STEM students, we'll let them stay an extra 2 years. So in total, they get 3 years, so they get 3 shots at the lottery, okay? And he, in the executive order, he says, we are going to reform practical training programs for foreign students to prevent the disadvantaging of US students in the workforce. Now, as someone who read the regulations for the STEM OPT and all the discussion that went into the drafting of the regulations, this was what the other side argued. Like, no, giving them 2 more years is hurting American workers. It's like, what? Like, honestly, if you go to a graduation of an engineering school or a computer science program, there are no white Americans graduating. So, you know, it's like interesting that he's saying this. What Americans are doing these majors? What Americans are graduating in STEM fields? I mean, this is the truth, and that's why the Obama administration passed these regulations, because the employers said, I'm so sorry, because of the video, we're taking questions at the end. So so he is saying this could be reformed, and he could cut the 2 years, okay? What about the H-4 EAD? This is also very narrow for the H-1B workers who have spouses. Once you're in the green card process, your spouse can finally get work authorizations. Very narrow. You know, to be honest, I don't think it's nothing that could be, it doesn't say anything specific, but they might scrutinize it for national interest. Again, having read the drafting language around the regulations, again, with the other side, when the other side was arguing, oh, we're letting more people into our workforce, it's actually a very small number. Very small number of H-1B spouses, the spouses of H-1Bs who are getting green cards, who are applying for these. So I don't know if it's going to be worth undoing this program. What about the TN visa? Those of you may or may not know, the TN visa is for Canadians or Mexican nationals. It's based on a treaty. There's a schedule of occupations. And so, Trump talks about NAFTA, how he wants to end NAFTA. NAFTA is terrible. And of course, the TN visa program is part of NAFTA, so everyone holding the TN status is now really frightened and wondering, are they going to be cut? Again, I don't think so, because the TN is based in statute. And to change the statute, it takes a lot. And Trump, being the tweeter that he is, and just his style, which is just issuing executive orders, I don't think he has the patience to push through what it would take to get rid of the TN visa program, okay? All right, so what about the International Entrepreneur Parole Program? So this could be in serious jeopardy. So I don't know how many of you, well, we're gonna talk about it. And part of the reason why it could be in serious jeopardy is because no one's gotten to have it. So I think if you were to make a due process argument saying, I wanted this, now I can't have it, it's just not going to fly in court, right? Because it's like, well, it never took effect. So let's talk about what is the International Entrepreneur Parole Program. It's supposed to take effect July 16th. Okay, so I just want to start with the big picture. I want to tell you that the standards for the International Parole Program are so rigorous. It's uniformly criticized as being very difficult, the criteria. And actually, the criteria were even harder when they proposed, they being the government, proposed the regulations. And everybody wrote back saying, because the way the US government works is the government proposes rules and the public gets to comment on them. And then all of that is documented, and then the US government will issue final regulations responding to all the comments. Okay, so as a lawyer, I can read all the discussion points to each regulation. And so one of the things that consistently came up is like, this criteria is impossible to meet. What is this program? So let's go through it. So President Obama created this because if you look at this stat, and it's in the regs, it's one of the top 50 venture capital funded startups in the United States. 48% had at least one immigrant founder. So clearly, foreign talent, foreign nationals are an extremely dynamic entrepreneurship element in the United States, right? And it's recognized. And so President Obama was very clear, and he said, allowing international entrepreneurs to live in the United States and grow their companies is of significant public benefit. Okay, so what's the criteria? Number one, the applicant must have, in the last 5 years, established a US startup business. Okay, it used to be 3 years, now it's 5 years. He must or she must hold an ownership interest in the startup of at least 10%. It used to be 15, they reduced it to 10. And then you have to play an active and central role. Something got glitched, but show proof of, it's just the spacing. Show active role in the operations of business, cannot just be an investor, and you have to show proof of funding. Just to go back to icon number 3, play an active and central role in the operations of the business. So it's like, you could be someone who's independently wealthy, you have a lot of money from your family, you come in, you're like, yeah, sure, I'll give 250 grand to the startup, and then I'm just gonna hang out. It can't be like that. You have to play an active and central role in the company, okay? So now let's talk about the funding, because this was a big fight. Okay, the startup must have received at least $250,000 from qualified US investors. It used to be $345,000. And it was reduced down to $250,000 because it's just not easy to get $345,000 in investor money, okay? But it's also, the other thing it says, which is really important, is that it must be from a qualified investor. The number one reason for elaborating on what a qualified investor is, make sure relatives are not investors. Okay? They don't want like your mom and dad or your grandpa investing and then you come over and start this business. They want it from a qualified US investor. It cannot be from a foreign investor. So it can't be some Russian family or Russian investor. It has to be a US qualified investor. And the reason for this, the government has explained, is because then they can evaluate the legitimacy of the funding. They want to make sure it's clean money, right? So what does that mean? So, and what is a qualified investor? You must have made one or more investments in at least 3 different calendar years in the preceding 5 years, totaling 600,000. It used to be $1 million. They reduced it to 600,000. Okay, and the big point is, cannot be relatives. Cannot be related to any of the investors. Okay? The startup must have received 100,000 in grants and awards from qualifying U.S. federal, state, or local government entities. If you're a startup, like a nonprofit, doing something, you know, where it's maybe you're figuring out an app for children, you're nonprofit, then it's 100,000. Okay? Now, let's say you get 200,000 in funding, you're not at the 250. The government is open to you providing other evidence. Like, okay, I don't have 250 right now, but it's coming. 50,000. I'm going to get another 100,000 in 6 months or 8 months, and I'm going to be hiring a lot of people. I think, again, as international entrepreneurs, if you want to start a company in the United States or start a business, I think the big takeaway from all the trends, all the developments we're seeing is you want to partner with U.S. citizens or green card holders. You want to hire U.S. workers. You want to really show how you are going to benefit the U.S. economy. Okay? So what is parole status? This is it's probably not going to be of interest to you, but it's interesting to me as a lawyer because it's a legal concept that was created to get around the fact that Congress wasn't letting President Obama pass any immigration reform. Okay? So he's like, fine, we won't create a new visa category because that will require Congress's approval. I'm just going to create this status. It's called parole. It's not a visa. And he has the authority to parole in any national in the U.S. interest, right? So usually parole is given to people that aren't technically allowed in the United States. We don't give them visas, but we let them in for humanitarian reasons. That is generally where parole has been used. So President Obama says, okay, well, I'm going to use parole for international entrepreneurs. Just to give you an example, I don't know how much of you guys seem like you're much younger, but it's like Palestinian Liberation Organization. It was something which the US government for a long time refused to recognize, but they are part of the UN in New York. And Yasser Arafat, who was their leader, he used to come to the US, and he used to also come for surgery. And so he would always be paroled in because we could never give him a visa because we didn't recognize the PLO, right? And there's no state that he had a passport from that we recognize. So that's historically what parole came in. So he was very clever in using this concept to be like, all right, well, I'm just going to extend this to international entrepreneurs. So it is a legal entry. You are permitted to enter. You are not given a visa. Okay, you're not going to go. It's not like at the consulate where you have your F1 or B1 or E2, whatever visa. And there is no direct path to permanent residence. Okay. So that's what does parole status mean? Okay. Most big takeaway, it's not a visa status, and there's no direct path to permanent residence. So just some nuts and bolts. It's initially granted for 2 years, and then you can extend by another 3 years. I will walk through the requirements for an extension in a minute. The form is an I-941 application for entrepreneur parole. It has not been released yet. They're working on it over the summer right now. There's a $1,200 filing fee, which is pretty steep. Now, here's the thing. You might say, well, do I have to have a salary? Is there a baseline salary that I must be paid as an international entrepreneur? So what you want to do is make sure, it's kind of your household income must be above 400% of the poverty guidelines. So what does that mean? It means you want to talk to your immigration lawyer and say to her or him, I'm going to be bringing over my wife and kids, or it's going to be just me. You tell him how many people are in your household. And then we're going to say, well, how much do you think you could realistically earn with your startup? And then we look at the poverty guidelines for the household size, and we times it by 4. So this is just to give you a rough idea. And basically, you can count any income your spouse would earn towards the household income. Because your spouses are allowed to work in the United States. That's one of the big bonuses of the International Entrepreneur Parole Program, is that your spouses are allowed to work. So you could say, look, as a CTO of this startup, I'm only going to make $40,000. My wife is coming with me, and she's going to make $30,000. So between the two of us, we'll have $70,000, and that's above the 400% poverty guideline rule. Does that make sense? They don't make anything easy. They don't make anything easy, but that's just to know that the salary amount that you will have to earn as an international entrepreneur for this program will depend on how many people are in your family and whether your spouse will be working. Okay? You can figure out how much we need to set. So now, let's say you get the International Entrepreneur Program. You've done it for 2 years, you're going strong, you want to extend. It is permitted for 3 years if the startup continues to operate, entrepreneur continues to play a central role in the business. At this point, 5% ownership is okay. And the startup has created jobs, at least five full-time employees. So in 2 years, you have to have 5 full-time employees, received more funding. Look at this number. 500,000 more in funding, and generated significant revenue, 500,000 annually at a 20% annual average growth. This is clearly bureaucrats sitting in Washington who may not have a grasp on what's realistic, and that's what a lot of people have criticized this program. I mean, this is wildly successful stuff, but you can have a combination of the above. I think having 5 full-time employees may be the most realistic for a startup after 2 years, right? But then they're also thinking that you already started this 3 years, a few years ago, so that's the extension. Okay? About dependents, I've already mentioned it. Your spouses and children may join. Children have to be under 21. Spouse may work, can apply for employment authorization. Of course, a lot of spouses also end up liking to study in the United States while they're here, so they can do that. Just a couple of limitations. A startup entity cannot have more than 3 entrepreneurs, okay? So if you and your friends are starting a startup together, only 3 of you can be foreign nationals who will benefit from the International Entrepreneur Program. Okay, so I think it's a way of avoiding like a startup, just a shell, and your 5 people are getting International Entrepreneur Parole Program. There's no appeal of the denial, and the parole status can be revoked at any time if the startup ceases to operate or stops providing a significant public benefit to the U.S. Just to show that we're being really tough on the requirements, I mean, they have to say this stuff to reassure the more hardline anti-immigration folks. Okay. All right. So why do we think that this is in jeopardy? This program, we are afraid, is in jeopardy because, first of all, Trump wants to undo everything that Obama did. And one of the things he said in the executive order, about the draft jobs, the one I was telling you about that has been leaked, is that he wants to terminate all parole policies that seek to circumvent immigration law. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, that President Obama came up with this whole concept to get around the fact that Congress wouldn't create more visas. Okay, they were not passing immigration reform. So he found alternative ways to try and to create some kind of reform, right? So that's what DACA was. I explained about. That's what the H-4 EADs were. These are little steps he took to try and at least address immigration. And it took him 8 years to pass this. It was right at the end of his 8 years of presidency he was able to push this out. And Trump clearly said, we're going to review all parole policies. What parole policies are there? This is the only one that's really been articulated. That seek to circumvent immigration law, and we will terminate them. So most people are reading that as Trump's way of saying the International Entrepreneur Parole Program will be reviewed to see if it should not be terminated. So I think, I don't have, sorry, this is my view of what's ahead, chaos. And I'm not the only one. This is Thomas Friedman. He's a New York Times journalist. He wrote The World is Flat. Do you guys know of him? Well, he says that this administration is going to be like a chaos presidency. And I think just judging from the way these executive orders were released 1 week into his presidency without much thought of the consequences and the chaos, and just just the tweeting style, and I don't think he really understands what he's doing, but I think that I think it's going to be very turbulent, is what I'm trying to say. The takeaway for you guys is, it's going to be just as frustrating for you as your immigration lawyers, because it's going to be hard for us to give you a concrete answer. I mean, we can give you answers, but we're going to have to say to you, situation's fluid. That's what we're seeing. But like I told you before, and I keep reiterating, I think if you come to the table saying, well, I'm going to create the startup that's going to generate 5 jobs, and this is for U.S. workers and U.S. economy benefit, I think that is really going to strengthen your plans for the U.S. And I wanted to say, if the International Entrepreneur Parole Program is not ultimately allowed to take effect in July, there's always the visa for extraordinary ability. So I don't have slides on that, but and I actually have 1 minute. So I'm just going to tell you, the O1 visa is for individuals of extraordinary ability. And in fact, if you're someone who can get that much funding, $250,000, if you're someone who's creating a startup, you're probably someone who we could discuss extraordinary ability visa for. So if you're someone who's on their way thinking, oh, I thought this was going to take effect, I'm fundraising, I have my partner, we have our startup, we have our space at a co-working space, and we're going. It's okay, well, don't despair. We'll see what happens in July. But we also have the O1 visa, which is for extraordinary ability. And for some people, there's the E2 investor visa, right? So there are some visa options if this was a very real program you were contemplating. Okay, so I think, oh, here's my contact details. So yeah, there you go. Thank you. Right at 8.
All right. Set up a mic stand. So if you have a question, come on up, ask a question. Ideally, you don't want to get too specific or too personal, but there'll be time for that later on, offline. But come on up, and hopefully your question is going to benefit other people in the audience. So who's got a question? So come on up to the mic right here. You guys can kind of line up.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. David, question about the H4.
Yeah.
So my wife is I'm on H-1B, my wife's on an H-4. Is it true that the H-4, because it's done through the rulemaking process, that if Trump wanted to change the H-4, he'd have to go through like a rulemaking comment process as well?
Yeah.
That you have some lead time on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I was saying, this is for her EAD, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, I just don't see there much happening because, first of all, I don't think giving H4 EADs is contrary to national interest. And then, yes, and then logistically, it's going to be more cumbersome for him to do because of the rulemaking.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of lead time. And I think because of that, it's just, I don't know if it's going to happen.
It's the H-4 based on the parole authority, or is
No,
it?
no.
Okay, it's not. Okay.
No, not at all.
All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the great presentation. I'm currently F1 student. I'm studying at the graduate program. I'm F1 student. Then I'm trying to extend my stay in the US by applying for OPT and setting up my own company, hiring myself as a CEO. But you mentioned that Trump is now targeting on STEM OPT, but does that mean he's not kind of targeting at normal OPT?
So, yeah, great question. I don't think, so what is your major?
MBA.
Yeah, okay, so you're not eligible for a STEM OPT.
Yes.
Okay, so you're eligible for the 1-year OPT.
Yes.
No, I don't think he's going to go after the 1-year OPT. It's, again, his whole thing is he wants to undo what Obama did. So STEM OPT is something that went through under Obama.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Again, remember, my big caveat is everything's fluid, but I don't think this is 1-year OPT. And that's because it's going to really, really hurt the U.S. universities. And international students are such a tremendous amount of money that I think the U.S. universities would throw a fit.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Oh, it was a depressing topic, but thank you.
No, it's very informative. My question is, if you have any dismissed convictions that will impact your future visa extensions or green card? Dismissed, I mean.
Yeah, great question. This is something that a lot of people unfortunately get confused by. Your conviction could be dismissed.
Yes.
It could even be expunged, but for immigration purposes, it's still a conviction. It has to be disclosed. And if you don't disclose it, because what happens is when they do your biometrics and take your
No,
fingerprints.
but no biometrics and no fingerprints in that case. Because the case is dismissed right away because of due to some miscommunication.
Oh, I don't know. So the charges were dismissed, or
Yeah, charge.
Oh,
Sorry,
if the
conviction is charge. Sorry.
Okay, so if the charges were dismissed, you should always disclose it, but you just explain the charges were
Okay.
dismissed. Yeah, that should be no problem.
That is not impacting future green card process or visa extensions.
Only way it could impact your future immigration status is if it had to do with drug dealing. Because because with drug dealing, you don't need a conviction. They just need to suspect you were involved in drug dealing for them to not let you in.
Okay, I'm talking about some kind of charges like DUA or hit and run charges without any conviction or no fingerprints. That kind of cases, I mean.
If you were just charged and the charges were dropped, then I think you might have to say you were arrested.
No.
You were not arrested. I think there's two ways to go about it. You can either just not say anything. Okay. My fear is that when you do the FBI fingerprints, but you're saying you didn't get any fingerprints taken.
Oh, no. Actually, I can give you an example. Like for example, one of my friend, what happened is, he involved in a traffic incident.
Yeah.
He answered that issue with the auto insurance. He completely paid. But somehow still the district attorney filed the hit and run that went to wrong address. So there is no action up to next 3 years. There is no arrest because there is no reminder. So after 3 years, he identified that with some other source by public record search. So he appeared. He took some attorney help and they helped to dismiss the case. So that kind of case, there is no fingerprints, there is no arrest, but the case is dismissed.
Then I think you could probably get away with not saying anything. I'm just explaining.
We can disclose the case, but that will impact future.
It will definitely not impact
that's
future
my
immigration. disclosing may impact processing time.
Processing time.
So I'm wondering, do you even want to disclose because it could slow things down because someone has to look at it again?
Yes, yes.
And I think it's always better to just disclose because what you don't want is somehow the government knows and says you didn't tell us about this. That's going to create a bigger mess.
Okay, if you disclose, it may take more processing time.
It just might slow things down, but it will not affect your immigration.
Even the visa stamping, that kind also we have to disclose, right? In the
Yeah,
DSMC.
you should, and then they're going to be like, what was this about? And then you have to like really practice your explanation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very informative presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Jumping forward a little bit of speculation.
Yeah.
So as an immigration lawyer, if you think of the scenario where H-1B laws change and there's some number of people who can't stay in the U.S., do immigration lawyers in general start mapping out, saying, okay, you can't stay, we could park you in the UK, Canada, Ireland? Do you start looking at those countries, I know Canada's changing their laws, and saying, here's your options that are close by, or is it U.S. only, doesn't work, sorry?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure I even understand the fiction that we're in, which is H-1B workers are not allowed? What does that, what are you thinking? Tell me a little more.
No, if Trump changes any of the laws, like friends of mine that are here on H-1Bs, they're like, okay, so what if it changes and I can't stay?
I can almost bet my 401k that that's not going to happen.
So it won't go that drastic.
It will not be that drastic.
Okay.
What I think will happen is he might try, and I don't think, look, what his issue is, he is very impatient and impulsive. So anything that's in statute, I think, is pretty safe. And the H-1B status is safe. H-1B cap, it would take Congress to undo the number. I think with Obama, we had hopes that things would improve. There's going to be no improvement. And when we say improve, we define improvement for your demographic as more visas, like easier, processing. That's unlikely to happen. But H-1B workers who are already here, unless they're nationals of those 7 countries, and even that, there's no effect on them right now, I don't think anyone's going to not be able to stay here or go. Okay. Because that's going to affect their U.S. employers.
Huge. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Axel. I have a question about the E2 treaty trader. And where do you think it's going there in terms of number of American jobs that is needed to create to get approval of the visa and also for renewal?
Yeah, great question. I don't know, I couldn't say concrete number of jobs. That's everyone asks with the E2, what's the minimum amount I need to invest? What's the minimum number of jobs? I think I've never been able to give you a number. My first recommendation is always, it has to match with your industry, right? So if you're opening a little gelato shop, right? Or if you're opening a little cafe, or we actually serve a lot of Japanese clients. We have a Tokyo office, and the Japanese are actually the biggest users of the e-visa, and they open sake bars, sushi bars. Sometimes sushi bars can only have like 3 employees. So it just depends on the business, okay, and the amount of money. So I think we would have to look at what's the type of business you have. But what I'm trying to say is I think a lot of business plans would not focus heavily on how many people they were employing, or people were filing E2 visa applications without having hired any US workers. And I would suggest we need to focus your hiring plan of US workers, or maybe even have a few hires at the time you file. So I'm sorry I can't give you more concrete numbers, but that's just always been the case with the E2.
So there is no changes mentioned to the
Sorry?
E2s so far? Is there any changes that have been proposed?
No.
No.
Changes? No. It's just, it was what was in the slide, that we're going to review the E2 to ensure full compliance. And I think when they say full compliance, the requirements for the E2 is that it can't be enough. What is happening with the E2 is that people would invest just enough to create a business for themselves to live here. That make sense? So it's like, a perfect example is I'm a Pilates instructor, I have my own business, go around instructing on Pilates, giving private Pilates lessons, and you're earning just enough for yourself to live. Some people were using, this is where the E2 started to go. And that's what they don't want. They're like, you're not generating jobs, you're not generating revenue, you're not spending a ton of money. That's what is going on.
Thank you. I'll describe a situation and maybe you can talk me through how to resolve this. So I'm a US citizen. I'm working with a few friends of mine who are back in India on a concept. And what we hope to do is go from concept to an MVP and then raise funds and then have a startup. Now, how do I get the co-founders here?
So, well, one, there's the visitor visa. Okay, so have them come in as visitors. They can come for 6 months, and you can extend by another 6 months. So that's a year. Okay, they can't be earning money in the United States. Meaning, when I say earning money, it means you can't be on U.S. payroll. Okay, they can draw money, but then they just need to pay taxes on it. It's a separate thing from immigration. Okay, so that's one option. The other option is you create an entity in India. But I don't think this is going to work unless it's truly robust, because so many people started doing what I'm about to recommend, and it was...
Yeah, that whole 1 year L1 thing, right?
Yeah, because what was happening is they were coming over, and then the entity in India would be just a shell. No one was left there. So that's no longer working. So I would say your best bet is the B1.
Because the crucial part of the whole startup journey is now. While we are conceptualizing, building stuff, talking to customers, investors, right?
Yeah.
It's getting difficult with half the party being not able to come here.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, how do we even do a visitor visa? There's no entity. We can do an entity which says, I need this person here.
Well, they can say they're coming to look at business opportunities. I mean, I would need to look at the facts a little more, but you can, they don't have to be visiting an entity here. They can say they're exploring business opportunities. I mean, they have to have jobs back in India, maybe family.
Right.
The key concern is that they're going to go back home at the end of their stay, and they have enough money to support their stay here.
But if the stated intention is to come over, work on something, and if it draws investment, then keep on working on the idea. So basically elongating the stay.
Yeah, I'll be very...
6 months, that B1 route.
Well, that's why the International Entrepreneur Parole Program was created, because the...
But that also presupposes you're already here, right?
No,
because how would you... I mean, it's unrealistic to draw investment while you're not even here.
Well, unfortunately, the bottom line is there aren't a lot of options for the fact pattern you've described. There's just not. And that's why the International Entrepreneur Parole Program was created, but this is one of its criticisms. How do we even get them over? Well, it's the visitor visa. You get them over on the visitor visa, and then this is the International Entrepreneur Parole Program really is for people, I think, who have studied here and are going to take off. And I see that a lot.
I guess in this situation, right, this friend here, even if he gets just 1 year and he does a startup, what happens after that 1 year? I mean, which visa would he, I mean, he can't file H1 for himself.
No, you cannot file an H1B for yourself. So you couldn't also, just so for your partners, you couldn't sponsor them for H1Bs because they're going to have an ownership interest in the company.
Right.
So for anyone who doesn't...
And then it's kind of deceiving to get an H1 from somewhere and actually use it for your startup, right?
Oh, like an outsourcing agency, job placement? Those are, I'm going to tell you, the Department of Homeland Security is totally after them, those job shops. They've been around, and it's funny, like they have like 7 lives. I mean, there was one, this was a tenant, like in the same building as us. He must have gone through 3 Department of Labor audits. He was always being audited. He just his job shop kept going. They hate him.
Yeah.
I think those will be eventually shut down.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit more about the investor visa? Is that the same as the E2? Because
if you're Indian
say that
nationals,
if we bootstrap up to whatever that amount is that a good route?
Well, if you're Indian nationals, it's not, you're not eligible.
Because that's for the treaty countries.
Yeah. So it is exactly your fact pattern. There are very few options. They have to be either extraordinary or come in as visitors and hope that the international parole.
Yeah, because in my specific case, I'll just take half a minute. The co-founder has an exit. The company was sold to Intel. He has patent. So we could make a case that he is of extraordinary ability.
But then you need to show that you have work lined up here. So you need to show that, yeah, that's where the funding comes in. I know. I don't.
Oopsie. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know. I feel like people get frustrated, but it's really that the immigration laws. I think there's an idea that it's like the Wild West, the gold mine, the gold rush. Everybody can come here and have their startup, but in fact, the laws are not that easy.
All right. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I have completed my 9 years on H1. So
Oh my gosh.
This is my 10th year. I'm in the same Silicon Valley from the last 10 years. So my question is, I hear like a lot of 221G usual while if you travel. Do you hear any that in even though if you have a full-time employment?
212G waiver.
That is, if you go for a visa stamping, they are giving that, what is that, 221 pink slip or something in the stamping. Do you see any that kind of issue?
Well, yeah, we're seeing them, but it's just case specific.
No, there is no reason, but they are giving without reason. They are going to administrative processing.
Yeah, out of India, that is very common.
Very common nowadays.
It's been common.
So what is the longest period you've seen, like 6 weeks or 5 weeks?
I've actually seen, it goes up to 90 to 120 days.
90 to 120 means you may lose your job here, right?
I know. We've had that, where we've had to like really ask the client. So I've had a client, their foreign nationals are at client sites. They go back to India to pick up their visas. They're put in admin processing. The reason why they're put in administrative processing, just for those of you who don't know much about this, is India's consulates they do tend to be very high fraud posts. Two of the biggest fraud issues is they have fake educational documents, and number two is that they have fake client site letters. So they'll have like a fake Cisco or eBay like letterhead saying, I'm going to be, I'm working for this company, a shell, job placement, a job placement, and look, here's my client site engagement with Cisco. And then they'll call Cisco and say, who's this person? And it'll turn out there's nobody at Cisco. This is fake, and there's no job for them. They're just coming to be basically a temp agency. Does that make sense? So it's not really going to apply to nationals outside of India because it's just that is what they're putting into administrative processing. However, if you're working at like Google and you are a software engineer at Google and your pay stubs show Google, I don't think you're going to be put in admin processing.
Oh, okay. If you submit the pay stubs, everything, so there are less charges for the admin processing?
Yeah, the admin processing is just because, especially Chennai, it's one of the highest fraud posts in the world.
Yeah, I seen in the 2011 I traveled to Mexico. That time they called directly my my manager, and they issued me my visa on the next day. But sometimes they are taking weeks, right? That time they got only 1 day delay, so I didn't face any much issue for 1 day.
They do follow up. They want to know, are you really going to work for the employer that you're saying you're going to work for? Because oftentimes that's not the case.
Okay. And another follow-up question by my friend. So, for example, if you travel, if you are not able to come back due to some visa stamping, do you see any issues for if you have any investment properties or primary residence in the United States? Do you see any issues for your properties if you are not able to come back? You got my point? Because a lot of my friends want to buy houses in the Silicon Valley area, but right now they put their decisions on hold because of all these visa issues. They don't have any predictive time for the green card. Right? Previously, everybody will think that they can get in 12 years or 13 years, but right now, there is no certain, even the attorneys are suggesting like 15 years, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I understand the question about buying properties.
No. For example, if you buy some properties here, 1 or 2 properties here, if you went back to India or your home country, you are not able to come back. So, is there any issue? For example, you have to sell with your agent. That is the only way, right? If you are not able to come back.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Because I don't, to me, having the property and not being able to come back are two separate things. If you have a property and, I mean, your ability to come in and out of the country has nothing to do with your properties, right? But you're saying, well, what if I'm not allowed in? Should I buy a property or not? I mean,
No, I'm not asking that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
so, for example, if you are not able to come back,
then yeah, you sell it through an agent. Yeah.
that is the only. Okay, that
I
is.
mean, no officer is going to let you in.
Okay.
If you've been denied entry or denied a
Okay, that's
visa
what
and
my
you try,
question
yeah, okay, I understand now your question. So if you try to say, well, wait, I have a property there, I don't think, if you've been denied, there's probably something really big on your record that is not going to be outweighed by ownership of property.
Okay, both are completely different. Means your arrival and your properties are completely different. That's what I'm saying.
What I'm trying to say is, if you are being denied, there's probably a big reason.
Okay.
You're not denied admission or a visa that easily.
Oh, denied admission, that's what you said, right? For example, this admin processing is taking 100 to 120 days, right? By that time, if you lose your job, so you cannot enter again, right? That's my question. That is a very possible scenario.
Okay, yeah, so in that situation, you're no longer allowed to enter. You could seek to get a B1, B2 and say, I have properties I own there that I want to liquidate.
Okay, that is the only way. Okay.
I think that is a way to do it.
I got it.
Okay.
Hello, Nadia. My name is Roy Chetty, and I provide a lot of commercial insurance for startups. And I've seen a growing number of H-1B people, getting very excited about one of the issues that you raised in your bullet, and that is, if you're on a visa status and you are on a charge, create a scenario as to what happens if they are not even convicted. What happens in that scenario?
Okay, if they're in a visa status and they're charged, it's not an issue unless it's such a serious crime that they could be removed. It's more about if you are here illegally and you commit even a small crime, you have to be removed. So there's an underlying requirement that you're here unlawfully.
Okay, so it doesn't impact those that are bona fide visa holders.
Correct. People who are here lawfully are not impacted by this.
All right.
Unless they commit a crime that is so serious it makes them removable.
Okay.
So they should, when it comes to crimes, you need to talk to an immigration lawyer, and one that's experienced in the intersection of criminal law and immigration.
Great idea. So what advice would you give to those that are on temporary or transitionary visas from H-1B, let's say, to a green card, or they're in hiatus for a citizenship? What would you think they should be doing in terms of investments or creating value or wealth in this country at this juncture? Because I deal with a lot of homeowners, a lot of high-tech guys, who are looking at building wealth, but all of a sudden there's been this transition from, the world of dream making to a crisis here. So what advice would you have us give them in terms of what to do with their dreams of building a fortune by buying a home or investing in a business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's necessarily an immigration. There's really not anything I can say from an immigration perspective towards building wealth. What I will say, though, is that payment of taxes, properly, filing all your taxes, these are going to enable you to naturalize, get your green card. It is something the government looks at. The government doesn't really care if you're a homeowner, so I don't think from an immigration perspective, building wealth is I don't think there's really an effect. What I would say rather is make sure you pay your taxes and contribute to your community, like volunteer work, do something like that.
Thank you, very informative.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Claire. I have a question about the E2 visa.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that initially they grant 2 years of stay on an E2 status, and then after that you can renew it. Like I don't know how many times, but do you have a feeling that the renewal process is gonna be more strict in the future?
Yeah, I do think so. It depends on where you're renewing. So which country are you a national?
South Korea.
Okay, yeah, they're a big user of the E2. And I also think it depends on whether you're going to be renewing within the United States at USCIS or if you're going back to the consulate. The consulates are always stricter, but now I think USCIS used to be very relaxed, but I think USCIS is getting a little stricter as well. Either way, you want to focus on if you've hired US workers in your extension.
What if you're one of the just workers? You're not the CEO.
Oh, okay, so you're like one of the personnel that was sent over? And you have to renew your E2?
Not right now, but...
Well, generally, your visa should be good for 5 years, and you should be allowed re-entry after the 2 years for 5 years. And by the way, the E2 is valid indefinitely. You can renew indefinitely. We have a lot of Japanese clients who have been here 20 years. So I think there's going to be greater scrutiny. I think in your instance, if you're one of the employees, you just have to look at how strong how well the company is doing.
I see. And what do you think about our green card process? Is it going to be much harder?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, if you're a national of one of the 7 countries we talked about, they are going to slow down processing of green cards for them. They're going to be looking a little more closely. That's what the executive order said. And I think, but I think otherwise, no, I don't think, Trump wants to re-look at how the visas are allocated. When I say visas, that includes immigrant visas. And so we might see shifts, but I don't think it's going to get harder. It's just things are going to be slower, which may mean it's harder. But I don't think it's like, I think it's going to be slower, and there might be a little more scrutiny. But ultimately, you should, substantively, I think it's going to stay it's going to stay the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks for the informative session. I had a question about sponsorship for relatives on immigrant visa. We didn't really touch on that. Is that being affected by the orders or his policy?
No, nothing on family. That's why we didn't cover it. Family's untouched.
Thanks.
Okay, any more questions? Well, let's hear from Nadia.